What happens when the man who signs the checks puts on an apron and starts sweeping floors? Paul Benson had inherited the 13-location diner chain from his late father 5 years ago. The business had been running profitably, but lately, things had started to shift. Sales at one of the locations, Store 9, nestled in a mid-sized town just outside Cincinnati, had been slipping. Customer complaints were up. Turnover was high. But every report Paul got from the district manager painted a different picture. All under control. He didn't believe it. The place had always run on pride and people. If the numbers were sliding, something deeper was wrong, and Paul wasn't the type to send another email or wait for another sugar-coated report. He wanted to feel it himself, see the place in motion, hear the truth. So, he shaved his beard, dyed his hair darker, put on a pair of thick glasses, and created a fake resume under the name Dave Simmons. Said he was a former custodian looking for part-time work. The chain was big enough and had enough turnover that no one at Store 9 had ever met Paul in person. Most only knew the family name. He applied for a cleaning and busser position. The manager, a guy named Brad, hired him the same day over the phone. Start Monday. Black pants, black non-slip shoes, plain shirt. You'll sweep, wipe tables, and clean the dining room. That's it, Brad said flatly. Paul nodded. Got it. Monday morning came fast. The second he stepped through the back door, he knew something was off. No one said hello, no one looked up. It was like walking into someone else's garage. Yo, new guy, someone snapped. A short, wiry man with a shaved head and a manager badge was pointing at him. Dining room's a mess. Grab a broom. You sweep, you wipe, you stay out of the way. You screw up, you're gone. That was Brad. Paul grabbed the broom and got to work. He kept his head down, sweeping under booths, wiping down sticky tables, pushing chairs in. He watched, listened. The servers were stressed, rushing. The kitchen was loud and chaotic. Around noon, a group of high school kids left a mess, fries all over the floor, ketchup on the seats. Paul was cleaning it when he heard shouting from the back. I don't care if you're tired, you move faster or you're out. He turned and saw Brad standing over a young guy in a soaked apron. The kid couldn't have been more than 20. Sweat clung to his temple. He had dish soap on his forearms. His name tag read Miguel. I'm doing my best, sir, Miguel said, eyes wide. Your best sucks, Brad barked. That tray sat there for 10 minutes. You think you're doing me a favor by showing up? You're lazy. That's your problem. Miguel looked down at the floor, fists clenched at his sides. He didn't say anything. Paul felt something knot in his chest. He turned back to his broom, pretending not to notice, but his ears burned. Later, while wiping down the counter near the soda machine, a server named Alyssa came by. She was maybe in her late 20s, fast on her feet, and polite to customers. She gave him a little smile. Rough day one, huh? Paul chuckled lightly. Is it always like this? She looked around quickly before leaning in. Brad's a tyrant. He's been like that since the old assistant manager quit last month. Nobody wants to work under him. Miguel, that guy works double shifts. Quiet, never complains. But Brad hates him. Says he's too slow. Paul nodded, keeping his voice low. Why does he stay? Alyssa shrugged. He sends money back home. His mom's sick. He can't afford to leave. Paul's stomach turned. By the end of the shift, Paul had seen enough to know the reports were lies. The restaurant didn't have a staffing issue, it had a leadership one. Brad barked at everyone, shoved blame around, and didn't lift a finger to help during the rush. But it was what happened the next day during the lunch crowd that made Paul freeze mid-swipe. Miguel came out from the back, carrying a heavy bin of dishes, his face red and soaked in sweat. One of the trays slipped, and a plate shattered on the floor. The room went quiet. Brad stormed over. Are you kidding me? I'm sorry. Brad didn't let him finish. He stepped in close, face twisted. You're pathetic. You think this is hard? You're just washing dishes. A monkey could do your job better. You don't belong here. Miguel stood frozen, chest rising and falling fast. He didn't speak. He just knelt to pick up the shards. Paul dropped the broom. He walked over slowly, heart pounding in his ears. Hey, he said, looking Brad dead in the eyes. Don't talk to him like that. Brad turned, annoyed. Excuse me? I said don't talk to him like that. Brad laughed. You're the janitor, stay in your lane. Paul pulled off his glasses. I'm not the janitor, he said. My name's Paul Benson. I own this place. Everything stopped. Brad didn't move. His mouth hung slightly open, as if the words hadn't registered. A few heads turned from tables. Alyssa, still holding a tray, froze mid-step near the drink station. Miguel stopped sweeping the glass, eyes flicking between the two men. You're full of it, Brad said finally. Benson's never set foot in this dump. Paul pulled out his wallet, flipped it open, and held up his ID. Brad's eyes narrowed. The red faded from his face, replaced by something colder calculation. He stepped back, straightened his posture. I didn't realize, he started, his tone suddenly lighter. You should have said something. No, Paul cut in. You don't get to switch gears now. He turned to Miguel. Are you okay? Miguel nodded, but didn't speak. He was still crouched, one knee on the tile, a broken plate shard in his hand. Paul knelt beside him. I'll handle this. You've done nothing wrong. Miguel stood slowly, his hands trembling slightly, and walked toward the kitchen, head low. Brad crossed his arms, trying to recover control. Look, maybe I lost my temper, but this place has been short-staffed for weeks. I've been keeping it running. That kid's been dragging his feet since day one. That's enough, Paul said, voice sharp. Brad opened his mouth again. Paul raised a hand. You're done. Go clear out your things. You're not staying another hour. You're firing me? Brad laughed once, bitter. You don't know what you're doing. You think you can walk in here and... Paul took a step closer. You humiliated a staff member in front of customers. You've created a place where people are afraid to speak. We'll manage without you. Brad stood still for a moment, then turned and walked toward the office. His footsteps were heavy, and not a single employee looked his way as he pushed open the door and vanished inside. Paul exhaled. The restaurant buzzed again, cautiously. Servers resumed their paths between tables. Conversations picked back up. Alyssa walked over, her voice low. Didn't think anyone from the top even remembered we existed. Paul gave a tired smile. I forgot how much a place can change when you're not standing in it. She studied him for a moment. You gonna stay long enough to fix it? Yeah, he said. That's the plan. He found Miguel in the back, wiping down a prep counter near the dish line. The kid didn't look up when Paul entered. You didn't do anything wrong, Paul said. Miguel nodded once, but didn't speak. Paul hesitated. You're not in trouble. You've been working hard. I can see that. You didn't deserve what happened out there. Miguel glanced up. It's fine. I'm used to it. That's not fine, Paul said, and I don't want anyone here getting used to being treated like that. Miguel didn't answer, but his shoulders dropped slightly. Paul gave him a moment, then added, Take your full break after this. I'll cover the floor. He stepped back into the dining room. The lunch rush had thinned, but the place still felt tense, like people weren't sure what would happen next. Paul grabbed a towel from under the counter and started wiping tables. Alyssa approached again, this time more cautiously. So, what now? You gonna bring in someone new from the outside? I'd rather promote from within, Paul said. Someone who actually knows this place. She raised an eyebrow. That's rare. You interested? She blinked. Me? You've got the respect of the staff. You know the systems. And you didn't flinch when things got rough. Alyssa looked away, then back. I'd have to think about it. I've seen what that job does to people. You wouldn't be doing it alone. I'm not leaving after today. She nodded slowly, then walked back toward the kitchen. By late afternoon, Paul had spoken to every employee, one-on-one, quietly, no lectures, just questions. How long have you been here? What's the hardest part of your shift? What would make this place easier to work in? The answers were consistent. Not enough hands, equipment overdue for replacement, a schedule that changed without notice. One server, an older woman named Tina, nearly burst into tears explaining how her hours had been cut, with no warning last month, even though she'd worked there for 6 years. I thought I did something wrong, she said, but Brad never gave me a reason, just told me to check the board. Paul took notes, not on a phone, not on anything digital, a battered notepad and a pen. He wanted people to see him write, to see he was listening. By the time the evening shift rolled in, word had spread. Brad was gone. Paul was staying. Miguel had taken a proper break and returned with fresh gloves and a clearer face. The dinner rush hit hard around 6. Paul stayed on the floor, running food, wiping tables, refilling napkin stations. He didn't offer advice unless someone asked. He didn't tell people what they were doing wrong. He just helped. After the rush, as the last few customers lingered over coffee, Paul pulled Alyssa aside again, near the employee lockers. "I meant what I said earlier. If you want the manager role, it's yours." She leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "You sure? I speak up too much. I don't sugarcoat things. That's why I trust you." She exhaled slowly. "All right, but I want input on hiring, and I want to see the schedule before it goes up." "Done. And I want to train Miguel on the register. He's smart. He shouldn't be stuck back there forever." Paul nodded. "Make it happen." She extended a hand. He shook it. Before leaving that night, Paul gathered the team by the counter. Not a formal meeting, just a few words. "I came here because the numbers didn't make sense. What I found was a team that's been working too hard, with too little support. That's on me." He looked around the room. No one interrupted. No one looked away. "That change is starting now. Alyssa's stepping into the manager role. We'll be hiring, fixing equipment, and making sure no one's left, guessing about their hours." A few heads nodded. Tina crossed her arms, but her mouth twitched like she was holding back emotion. "I'll be around all week. You'll see me on the floor, not in an office. If you've got ideas or problems, bring them to me or Alyssa. We'll listen." He paused. "Thank you for sticking it out this long. You deserve better. We're going to build it together." The group dispersed slowly. Miguel walked past Paul and gave a small, quiet nod. It wasn't much, but it meant something. Outside, the sky had turned a deep blue, the sidewalk still warm from the day's heat. Paul stood just beyond the front doors, arms crossed, watching the last few guests leave. He didn't feel like an owner tonight. He felt like a part of something again, something tangible, and for the first time in a long while, he wasn't watching from a distance. The next morning, Paul arrived 30 minutes before opening. The sky was still pale, the street quiet. He unlocked the side door himself, stepped into the dim kitchen, and flicked on the lights. The hum of refrigeration units filled the silence. A prep cook named Daryl arrived shortly after, gave a short nod, and headed straight for the walk-in without a word. Paul respected it. Some people worked best in rhythm, not conversation. He wasn't there to play CEO. He was there to understand. By 7, Alyssa walked in, hair tied back, clipboard in hand. She moved with a different kind of purpose now, not faster, just firmer. She glanced across the kitchen, then turned to Paul. "I started drafting a new shift structure. We've been overlapping too many people on slow mornings and leaving the rush hours thin. It's a mess." He nodded. "Let's review it after lunch." As they spoke, Miguel slipped in quietly, already dressed. He gave Alyssa a nod and headed toward the dish pit. Paul watched him move, precise, focused, not fast, but deliberate, no wasted motion. By 8, the grills hissed, coffee brewed, and the first few customers trickled in. Paul stayed on the floor again, wiping menus, clearing tables, and occasionally running food. He noticed something new. The staff watched him differently, not with suspicion or fear, but curiosity. He was still the boss, sure, but he was also the guy who'd bust tables and took out trash. That counted for something. Around 10, the assistant general manager from another location, Marcy, arrived mid-40s, organized and sharp. She'd worked with the company for over a decade and had filled in once before at Store 9. "I heard Brad's out," she said quietly to Alyssa near the back counter. Alyssa nodded. "Effective yesterday." "I'm not surprised," Marcy replied. "He ran off half the night staff last month. Didn't tell anyone. We had to pull from 2 other stores to cover." Paul listened from a few feet away, wiping down a clean table again, just to stay near. "You looking to cover the role permanently?" Marcy asked. Alyssa didn't hesitate. "I'm in." Marcy gave a tight nod. "Good. Let me know where you need backup. You've got pull to request temps until we hire." Alyssa looked at Paul. He said nothing, just nodded once. That was enough. By lunchtime, the place filled quickly. A couple of families, a group of construction workers, and a table of teachers from the school down the street. The line at the register stretched long, but the flow was better. Still, Paul noticed something off. Miguel hadn't taken his 10-minute break. He was still rinsing, loading, unloading, stacking. His movements were slowing. Paul stepped into the back. "You've been on your feet 3 hours straight," he said. "Take a break, now." Miguel hesitated, then wiped his hands and stepped outside. Paul took over at the sink. The water was hot enough to sting. Steam clouded his glasses. He worked quickly, rotating trays, scrubbing off hardened bits of egg, and stacking silverware. After 15 minutes, Miguel returned. "You didn't need to do that," he said, drying his hands. Paul stepped aside. "I didn't do it for you. I did it because if we're going to make this place work, everyone needs to last the whole shift." Miguel allowed himself a small breath. "Thank you." Back on the floor, Paul spotted a problem near booth 8. A customer waved him over a woman in her 50s with a polished look and a clipboard. "You the manager?" she asked without smiling. Paul nodded. "I'm one of them." "I'm from the health department," she said. "Routine mid-quarter inspection." He waved Alyssa over. The inspector moved quickly, checking under counters, opening coolers, inspecting restrooms. Paul followed silently, noting every place she paused longer than a second. "Backline's clean," she said, "but you've got a leak under the soda fountain. And whoever's been mopping needs to ring properly. The water trail near the prep sink is a slip hazard." Paul wrote it down. "We'll handle both today." She nodded once and left without further comment. As the shift wound down, Alyssa joined him near the back door. "We need another dishwasher," she said. "Miguel can't keep doing doubles. He didn't complain, but I can tell he's running close to empty." Paul looked at the schedule board. "When's the last time he had 2 days off?" Alyssa checked. "Over a month ago," he exhaled. "Call in someone from store 3 to cover tomorrow night. Give him both days off, paid." She didn't argue. Later that afternoon, a young woman walked in for an interview, short hair, confident stride, resume in hand. Alyssa greeted her and led her to a booth. Paul stood a few feet away, pretending to check the register, but listening. "You've worked fast food before?" Alyssa asked. 2 years, the woman replied. "Mostly drive-through and prep at a burger joint." "You ever bust tables or do dish?" The woman hesitated. "No, but I'm willing to learn. I just need a shot." Alyssa nodded. "We're short on hands. This isn't a place where people coast. You work hard, you get respect. You game?" The woman smiled. "Absolutely." Alyssa shook her hand. "Trial shift tomorrow, wear black, bring non-slips, and show up on time." Paul waited until the woman left, then leaned over. "You're building a team." "I'm not hiring bodies," Alyssa said. "I'm hiring people who want to be here." Paul glanced at the clock. "Let's go over that shift structure." They sat in the office, the same one Brad had used. Except now the door was open and a whiteboard sat on the floor with notes written in 2 different handwritings. Alyssa laid out the plan. Staggered start times to avoid overlap waste. 2 closers instead of 1. Backline float support from 3 to 6. And every employee gets 1 weekend day off minimum. Paul traced the columns with his finger. "You think they'll like it?" "They'll like the consistency," she said. "They don't need favors. They need to know what to expect." He leaned back in the chair. "How's morale?" She shrugged. "Still guarded. They've been burned too many times, but today felt different." He nodded. "We keep showing up. It sticks." As the sun dipped low, Paul stood at the front window, looking out past the parking lot. A family stepped out with takeout bags, laughing about something. Inside, Miguel wiped down the last few trays. Tina was folding napkins at a side booth, humming softly. The new hire had confirmed her trial shift. Paul didn't feel triumphant. He felt grounded. It was a long road ahead. No instant fixes, no magic speeches. But for the first time in months, the place didn't feel like it was surviving. It felt like it was beginning. By the end of the week, the rhythm of Store 9 had started to shift, not dramatically, but noticeably. The changes weren't sweeping gestures. They were adjustments that showed up in the way people moved, the way they spoke to each other. There was less bracing for blowback, fewer glances over shoulders. But Paul knew those early signs could fade if not followed through. What came next had to be real and permanent. On Saturday morning, a delivery truck arrived behind schedule. Paul was in the back unloading boxes alongside Daryl when he noticed the new hire from the interview, Carmen, standing near the prep sink waiting for direction. Alyssa called out from the front, asking for someone to stock the walk-in, but no one responded. Carmen glanced around, then stepped forward. "I can do it," she said. Paul watched her lift the box of produce, heavy for someone her size, and carry it without hesitation. No one had asked her to. She just saw a gap and filled it. As she walked past, Paul tapped the clipboard hanging by the cooler door and scribbled down a note under staffing assessment. Across the kitchen, Tina was showing a newer server how to close out a cash drawer. She didn't raise her voice or slow down. She just walked through the steps with the kind of patience that only came from years of repetition and quiet pride. Paul waited until they were done, then motioned her aside. "You've trained people before?" he asked. "Plenty," she said, tying her apron tighter. "Back when we still had a proper onboarding system." He nodded once. "You good at it?" "I wouldn't still be here if I wasn't. I want to bring back structured training. If I make it official, would you head it up?" Tina raised an eyebrow. "With pay to match?" "Of course." She didn't smile, but her stance relaxed just slightly. "Then yeah, I'll do it." Paul stepped away to let her finish her shift, but kept thinking about what else had gone unsaid for too long. The problem wasn't just that the place had been mismanaged. It was that the people who cared most had been left out of the decisions entirely. Later that afternoon, the dining room filled again. A group of college students took up 2 booths near the windows. They were loud, but not rude. Still, one of the newer servers, Jordan, looked overwhelmed trying to handle their orders along with 3 other tables. Alyssa noticed and stepped in to help, splitting the load without saying much. Paul watched from behind the counter. She didn't call attention to herself. She just moved in where needed. That was leadership, not the badge on the lanyard. As the crowd thinned, Paul pulled Jordan aside near the soda machine. "How long you been serving?" he asked. 3 months, Jordan replied. "Started at a different location, then transferred here." "Why the switch?" "The old manager said I wasn't fast enough. Thought maybe a different store would be better." "You feel like you're getting better?" Jordan shrugged. "I'm trying. I care about the customers. I just get flustered when everyone asks for something at once." Paul nodded. "We'll get you some structured shadowing. You shouldn't be left to sink or swim." Jordan thanked him and returned to the floor. Paul made another note on his pad. That evening, a man walked in with a clipboard and a gray windbreaker, corporate compliance. His name was Kevin, and he'd been with the company since before Paul's father stepped down. He asked to speak privately, so Paul led him to the back office. "I got flagged reports from this store last month," Kevin said, flipping through a stack of printed forms. "High turnover, late food tickets, complaints about management." "I know," Paul said. "I've been here all week." Kevin set down the stack. "You saw it firsthand?" "Brad's gone." Kevin didn't look surprised. "I won't pretend that's a loss. We had similar issues with him 2 years ago, but the regional director pushed to keep him." Paul leaned forward. "That won't happen again. I'm restructuring the leadership pipeline, no more appointments without vetting. We'll promote from within where possible." Kevin nodded. "You'll need documentation, written evaluations. And if you're planning to roll this out across other stores—" "I am," Paul interrupted. "But not all at once. I want this location to be the model, then we build from there." Kevin looked at him for a long moment, then packed up the forms. "All right. I'll hold off on escalation, but keep things clean. No corners cut. You won't need to remind me." After Kevin left, Paul walked the floor one last time. The light was beginning to fade outside. Miguel was finishing up the dish pit, sleeves rolled, hands steady. Carmen was restocking condiments without being asked. Tina was checking the drawer count. Alyssa was reviewing the new schedule with 2 employees near the host stand. He gathered everyone for a quick meeting. No speeches, just clarity. "Starting next week, we're launching new roles. Tina will run training. Alyssa's manager status is official. Miguel is moving to cross-training on the line." Miguel looked up, surprised. "Really?" "You've earned it," Paul said. "And we need people who can step into more than one role." He turned to Carmen. "You're staying on past your trial. Your initiative's been noticed." She nodded, eyes wide but focused. "Jordan," Paul continued, You'll shadow Alyssa next week for pacing and flow. No pressure, just support. Jordan gave a short nod, not smiling, but standing straighter. Paul looked around. This isn't a reset. This is the ground floor. We build from here, and I'm not watching from an office. No one clapped, no one cheered, but no one looked away either. That was enough. Later that night, Paul locked up the back door himself. The air outside was cool, the street quiet. He sat on the curb for a moment, elbows on his knees, watching the closed sign reflect in the window. It hadn't been a single turning point. It had been dozens of small ones. A plate dropped, a voice raised, a silence broken, and the simple act of showing up. He thought about his father, how he used to walk the floor in the early days, talking to everyone by name. Somewhere along the way, that connection had frayed. But it didn't have to stay broken. The next morning, Paul drafted a new company policy. All district managers would spend one full shift per store, per month, working on the floor, no exceptions. He wrote it in plain language, no corporate padding. Then he sent it to every regional leader with a note, effective immediately. By Monday, Store 9 would run with stronger footing. The toxic weight was gone. The people who had stayed through the worst were now guiding the future. And Paul, he'd be back quietly, regularly, and without fanfare. Because leadership didn't end at the top, it started at the floor.